Find a comfortable posture. If you want to be sitting or laying down, any posture is okay. Just make sure your spine is straight. Let's take 3 deep breaths. With each in-breath, straighten your back. With each out-breath, relax all your muscles. Centering your body in a posture of relaxation and stillness. Check the main points of the posture. That your vertebrae are aligned. Your eyelids relaxed. Eyes can be closed or slightly open. Tongue behind the upper teeth. Jaw relaxed. Shoulders, neck. Your arms resting. Your hands on your lap or your legs. Make sure you're sitting in a posture of balance where you can relax. Allow your body, speech and mind to settle in its natural state. We set our motivation for this practice. May we find greater balance, equanimity, understanding, and apply our practice to our well-being, to live a meaningful life and to be of benefit to others. Now notice the sensations of the breath throughout your body. Relaxing with each out-breath. Allow any sounds, sensations, perceptions, emotions to arise and pass. without distraction, without grasping. And continue watching your breath without controlling it, without modifying it. Just aware of each cycle of in-breath and out-breath. Notice how your subtle body slowly and gradually finds stillness. Allow your breath to self-regulate. Some cycles might be longer, others shorter. Sometimes you will feel no need to take an in-breath. Just wait, let your body breathe when it needs. And with each out-breath, let go of any expectations. Any thoughts about the past or the future, any concerns, any hopes and fears. And continue relaxing deeper and deeper. If you get distracted, simply release the thought. Come back to the sensations of the breath throughout your body. And relax a little more. Allow your body to find stillness. As if it were falling asleep. Apply just the necessary effort to keep it balanced. And now, while continuing with your mind focused on the sensations of the breath, with that continuity of relaxation and stability, completely present, let's reflect on how to take the ache out of attachment. Based on a superimposition or exaggeration of the positive qualities of a person, object, idea, situation. Attachment is an attitude that clings to these objects as the source of happiness. So, what things, people, places, ideas, situations are you attached to? Bring to mind specific examples of your own life. Now choose from those attachments a person or a thing you identify to being attached to. Visualize it. How does that person or thing appear to you? Does it really have all the qualities you perceive and attribute to it? Do you develop unreal expectations of the person or thing, thinking that it always will be there? Will continuously make you happy? Does that person or thing has qualities that are undesirable, that you tend to ignore? Do you exaggerate its positive qualities? How does attachment make you act? Do you disregard your ethical standards to get or keep what you're attached to? Do you get into dysfunctional relationships? Do you become manipulative or aggressive? Do you experience pain or suffering when you're separated from that which you're attached to? Or when you don't get what you desire? When your expectations of that person or thing are not fulfilled? Take a moment to become aware of that pain, that suffering. That we experience when we are attached. And release it with the out breath. Feel that you let go of that attachment. As a conclusion, see attachment not as your friend, bringing you happiness, but as a thief, destroying your peace of mind. Recognizing the disadvantages of attachment helps to let go of it. Now dissolve any visualizations, thoughts, and come to rest in the present. Aware of being aware. Just resting here and now. Let's finish dedicating the potential of this practice, the merit we've cultivated, so that we can continue taking the ache out of attachment. Understanding reality as it is, relating with people, objects, ideas, in a way that is healthy and beneficial, and not with attachment and grasping. And through this training, maybe we're able to be of benefit to those around us. Slowly start moving body, stretch a little bit. And open your eyes. So this is one of the first meditations because, as we were discussing, attachment is one of the root causes of suffering. And it's coming out of ignorance, of this exaggerating the positive qualities of an object, person, situation, idea, even ourselves or our bodies. We can be attached to anything. We actually are attached to everything. And the other root of suffering is aversion or anger, hatred, rejection. And this is the opposite. Wanting to separate or get rid of an object, situation, person, or stimuli that we encounter. So these both are coming from ignorance, from our misunderstanding reality, our projecting what is not there, grasping to our interpretation, and then relating either with attachment or aversion. So from these three roots, arise all the mental afflictions. Jealousy, anger, fear, envy. And if we are able to work with these 3 roots, we can get rid of all the mental afflictions that we are always acting upon and that control our life, right? So every time a mental affliction arises, we can trace it back to one of these 3 roots. And of course, the main one is ignorance. That's why the cultivation of wisdom, not in an intellectual sense, but the wisdom of understanding reality, how we exist in relation to others and to objects and situations. That wisdom is what is liberating, what is going to liberate us. But we have to work with this attachment and anger to get to the root cause of ignorance. So when we do these meditations, they are called analytical meditations or checking meditations, and we are engaging the power of our mind to visualize, to reflect, to do reasoning, and that is beneficial. We usually, what we do is we start thinking about a problem, and then we do free association. We come up with another thought, and then another one, and then a memory, and then an emotion comes up, and it's just taking us in a random way and just giving rise to more mental afflictions. And then after thinking a lot about a problem, we probably don't find a solution, or we find a solution that is based on attachment or aversion, and then we act upon it and we complicate our lives even more. But when we do use our minds in this way to reflect about an attachment, a problem, a situation, and we do it focusing on these main points, then we are able to reach an understanding of how the situation is manifesting and how we are creating our suffering by the way we are engaging with the situation. And when we reach that conclusion or this understanding, then the important part of the meditation is to join it with the shamatha that we do at the beginning, with the calm abiding practice. And so just rest in that conclusion, in that understanding, in that aha moment where you reach an understanding or a conclusion that is not merely intellectual, but that it comes from your heart. That is a feeling more than a thought. And then rest there. And you don't have to overanalyze or keep thinking or visualizing. It's just innate to come to that conclusion. And then when you come to that understanding, then rest there and sustain it for as long as you can. So if it's a meditation where you are reflecting on the suffering of other sentient beings, for example, and you give rise to compassion, then once you start feeling compassion, then there's no need to keep thinking and analyzing. You drop the thinking, the visualization, and then you dwell on that experience of openness of your heart, the connection, empathy, and rest there. So that understanding is what becomes our object of meditation in that moment, and then we are conjoining this shamatha and vipashyana. So these practices, when we do analytical meditations, they're part of the vipassana practices. There's different ways of doing vipassana, but vipassana is not only being mindful or scanning our body, which is a misunderstanding many people have. So vipassana is a cultivation of a deeper insight or a way of seeing. It's called superior seeing or deep insight, penetrating wisdom. It has different translations, but it's this form of seeing that understands reality in a different way. It understands how things are, not how we think they are. So these practices of the Lamrim, as I was telling you, they come from this text initially, the text that Atisha wrote, A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And that at that time, Tibet had Buddhism. They already practiced since the 8th century when Padmasambhava or Guru Rinpoche, also called Guru Rinpoche, he came to Tibet and established Buddhism, and mainly what was practiced was the Dzogchen and Mahamudra lineages, the Kayu and the Nyingma lineages that have the practices of Dzogchen and Mahamudra. And so the Great Perfection is the Dzogchen and the Great Seal is Mahamudra. They're very similar, and they even have some similarities with the Zen tradition. But then after some centuries, the teachings started kind of degenerating. People couldn't find genuine teachers. There was a lot of misunderstandings and practicing incorrectly. So Atisha was invited. Both Guru Rinpoche and Atisha came from India to teach Buddhism. And so Atisha came in the 11th century, and he saw that they were a bit confused, and so he kind of started training teachers and explaining the teachings in a different way. So in this way were established the Gelug and the Sakya lineages, which are more analytical in this way. They guide us step by step. They display the path in a very clear way that we can follow and implement these steps. So he wrote this text that was pretty short and contained all this wisdom, but then later, as I told you, Lama Tsongkhapa and other teachers have been elaborating more and more and expanding on this topic, on the steps to enlightenment. But I wanted to read you a few verses from this text at the beginning. Usually the texts written by these masters start always with a reverence or a homage to the Buddhas, to their teachers, as a way to honor realized beings and where they got their inspiration from. And then, so he starts in that way, and then he tells us in the first verses, understand, there are 3 types of individuals, lesser, middling, and superior. I shall set out a system of classification in which their respective characteristics are made completely clear. Know that those who, by whatever means, exclusively seek mere mundane pleasures of samsara for their own benefit are lesser individuals. And here, he's not saying lesser individuals in a sense that is pejorative or minimizing people. It's the motivation, what he's referring to. So when we just are attached to mundane concerns, mundane pleasures, we just looking for that kind of temporary happiness or well-being. Our motivation is quite small or limited because it's not gonna give us lasting happiness and satisfaction. It's not gonna liberate us from suffering, right? But still, we can practice meditation and apply all the teachings and get some benefit for our lives. And it's not a negative thing. And we see it nowadays in our modern world. Meditation has become mainstream as a way to be another aid to our mundane life. And mundane, we refer to just seeking stimuli, external stimuli as the source of happiness or pleasure. So we see a lot of groups practicing meditation or even apps on our cellular where we can practice guided meditations, but that the goal of these meditations is not to lead us to enlightenment or liberation, complete liberation from suffering or address our deeper problems or traumas, right? They are oriented towards giving us less stress, a little bit more peaceful life, maybe develop a little bit of concentration that we can apply in our mundane goals, whether it's making money or having success in our business or in our family or any projects we have, to increase productivity or just to have a healthier mind, right? So that's not wrong, not bad, if it gives us some kind of benefit. But here Atisha is telling us, well, if that's your motivation, if that's the only motivation you have for practice, then that is considered a lesser motivation, a beginner's motivation, right? And then he continues and says, those who have turned their backs on samsara's pleasures and refrain from harmful karma, striving merely for pacification for themselves alone, such individuals are said to be middling. So this is the middle motivation, and here we might have reflected on how these pleasures, well, they provide us with temporary happiness, but it doesn't last too long. And many times these things that we're attached to, they become sources of pain. They transform, they change, they are not what we expected to be. So the pleasure or the happiness we get from this is very limited or very short term. And we reach a point where we are kind of disappointed. Like we know no matter what we chase after, it's not going to satisfy us. It's not going to bring us lasting happiness and fulfillment. So when we experience that kind of disappointment, it's actually a very good thing. It's the beginning of giving rise to this renunciation or a spirit of emergence. But many people misunderstand this and say, well, now I'm going to reject all kinds of pleasures or stimuli. I'm going to become an ascetic and I'm going to go live in a cave, right? Like sometimes we tend to go to the extreme, and now I'm not going to enjoy that meal because then it means I'm not a spiritual person. I'm very mundane if I enjoy going to the movies or anything, right? So that's not what we're talking about here. There's nothing wrong with enjoying things and people and situations. The problem is in the attachment that we get. We want more of that, more and more, and we never get satisfied. And we spend all our life chasing goals that when we reach them, they are not fulfilling, or desiring objects or things that as soon as we get them, we want something else. So knowing and understanding how we behave with relation to these objects is what starts making us decide that we don't want to keep living in that way without reflection, without understanding. And also, we want to refrain from cultivating harmful actions. We start understanding the law of karma, which karma means action, and the law of karma is just actions have consequences, right? And so we will do some meditations on karma and explain it more extensively. But basically, if you do an action, you do it either with your body, with your speech, or with your mind. Those are our 3 doors. And any action we perform, if we do it with a selfish motivation, with a motivation of attachment or a motivation of anger, the result is always going to be experienced as suffering. When we do an action with a motivation of loving kindness or compassion, generosity, patience, etc., with a virtuous motivation, the result is going to be experienced as happiness, as something pleasurable, agreeable, right? And so this is a middle motivation, because we start understanding karma and then we say, well, now I'm going to do virtuous actions because that means I'm going to experience more happiness, right? But you see, we're still attached to the outcome. We're still doing it out of self-centered attachment. So here we are striving for pacification of ourselves alone. So we are also concerned with this motivation of, I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. And the others, maybe I don't care so much about others, right? I'm very focused on myself and my own happiness and my own suffering and how to get rid of my suffering and find happiness for myself. So that's why it's a middling motivation. And then he continues and says, those who truly desire to completely eradicate all the suffering of others through their own personal suffering, such individuals are supreme. For these noble beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by spiritual teachers. So here it might sound a bit scary to think that through my own personal suffering, I will eradicate the suffering of others, right? We don't want to take the suffering of others. It sounds very daunting and scary, like something we don't want. But actually, when we start thinking that just as we want to be happy and not suffer, everybody else around us wants exactly the same, then we start opening our hearts to them and wishing for them too to find happiness and wishing to do something about it. So the more we are willing to experience some discomfort or even pain or some kind of what we consider suffering in order to benefit others or help others, that means we're less self-centered, right? We're more caring. We are more willing to alleviate the suffering of others. And in that way, we're cultivating the causes of our own happiness. Ironically, we will start feeling happier. And this will be a more genuine happiness, the one that will arise. So this might be difficult to understand because we think of those, for example, those doctors that go to trouble zones in the world where there is war or hunger and illness, and they expose their lives to go and help. And they do it just out of compassion. It's not like they're going to receive a lot of money or a great recognition or something. They actually doing it mostly because they're experiencing empathy and compassion. And you think, well, being there and seeing all that suffering and exposing themselves to illness and discomfort, how is that going to be happiness, or how is that going to feel good, right? But yet they find meaning in that life, and they are cultivating causes of happiness and fulfillment and coming closer to enlightenment, actually. And so the consequence of those actions is going to be genuine happiness. Maybe it won't be experienced as great joy or bliss in the moment, but there is another kind of fulfillment that they will experience, right? So there is this, there's a story, little story to illustrate this, and the story goes that there was a cow that fell in it's not a pond, it's like a pond, but it's a sewage. It's dirty waters, right? So it's drowning there, the cow. And then a person of lesser capacity or motivation comes by walking and sees the cow. And he or she they think, poor cow, how bad their situation. But they maybe just stop for a moment and acknowledge it, and then they continue their way and leave the cow there, right? And then another person of middling capacity comes by and sees the cow and says, well, I really feel sorry for you that you're thinking in this. Maybe I can do something for you, right? And they bring a stick and they're trying to help the cow by telling her, grab the stick, I'm going to try helping you, but it's very difficult. They give up. They say, I can't even help myself. How am I going to help the cow? It's impossible. So I'm just going to continue. I hope this cow finds a way to get out of there, but it's not in my hands. So they continue and leave. And then comes a person with supreme or higher motivation. And this is, of course, a practitioner that is continuously cultivating the motivation of being of benefit to other sentient beings, and not only human beings, like all beings. And the moment they see the cow, they don't even think about their own well-being. They immediately jump into the pond and try to, not pond, sewage. I don't know how you call a pond with dirty waters, but you understand, right? So they jump and they try to pull the cow out. So that is the spirit of the bodhisattva, right? Is not even thinking about their own well-being. It's jumping immediately to alleviate the suffering of others. And so if we are able to cultivate that higher motivation, that is the cause to achieve enlightenment. And in the Mahayana tradition, the great vehicle, this is the main motivation. That is what distinguishes the great vehicle from the Theravada, or sometimes it's been called kind of lesser vehicle, but it is considered kind of pejorative to call it in that way. So And actually, if you go to meditate in Theravada centers, you realize they are very loving and compassionate beings. They do cultivate a lot of loving kindness and compassion. The thing is that the teachings in the Theravada tradition were oriented to this motivation. Yeah, you can become a Buddha. They acknowledge that, but it's difficult. It takes a long time. It's hard. So why not focus on achieving liberation, cessation from suffering? And for that you need the realization of emptiness. So they strive to become arhats. And these traditions mostly developed in South Asia, Southeast Asia, countries like Thailand, Myanmar, parts of Cambodia, and there are several countries in that area that practice this kind of vehicle. When you go there, you realize that they are very loving and compassionate too, and almost bodhisattvas. But from the very beginning, the motivation you're putting into your practice is what is going to determine the path you're going to follow and how far you're going to get. So if you meditate, and every time you meditate, you dedicate your practice, and your motivation is to achieve the cessation of suffering, that's where you're going to achieve the cessation of suffering. If every time you meditate, you're setting your intention and your motivation to be the achieving enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, and being a bodhisattva, and being of benefit to all sentient beings, you don't know how you're going to get there, how you're going to be of benefit to infinite sentient beings, but you keep cultivating the motivation, the intention, then all the causes, all the practices you're doing become causes on the path to becoming a Buddha, or actualizing, realizing that state of Buddhahood. And so an arhat, a fully liberated being, is liberated from suffering, is liberated from karma. It has realization of emptiness, but still has some cognitive oscurations, and is not a bodhisattva. But eventually they will become Buddhas too, because compassionate Buddhas will come and they will help them, right? They're very close, so why not helping them achieve enlightenment? But it's a longer path. And so just to clarify that, when you hear about nirvana, is this cessation of suffering, the path of the arhat. But in the Mahayana tradition, we have the path of the bodhisattva. And why not, from the very beginning, including all sentient beings in your practice, right? It's a very beautiful motivation. And so in this text, Atisha is telling us how to practice that higher path. And we will be doing different practices, and I will be telling you when like the practices we're doing now, like working with attachment, recognizing the mind is the cause of suffering and pain. This can be practiced in the lesser motivation, right? But when we enter the path of the middle practitioner, I will tell you which meditations correspond to that meditation, and when we enter to the meditations section of the meditations of the higher capacity, higher motivation, then I will let you know. But I wanted you to hear how he introduces to this text. And of course we can read many texts, and we can read the whole I don't know how many volumes of Lama Tsongkhapa, but there are several volumes explaining the Lam Rim, the steps of the path to enlightenment. And we can read it and reflect on it, but if we don't meditate on it, it's not going to be transformative in our lives. That's why it's very important to study, to reflect, and meditate. And then study again, reflect, meditate. And doing it in that way to be integrating the teachings in our practice, in our lives, and not just being a understanding that has no impact in our lives, right? So, any questions or any comments about this? Yeah?
How do you proceed when you're realizing that someone is really attached to you, and how do you support people on their journey on lessening this attachment? I mean, if you're realizing that they experience enviness or something else, or so emotions which come out of attachment towards you. So how do you support them? I mean, of course you can explain let's say the concept of attachment, and you can bring them to meditate and so. But if they are not going to meditate and so, how do you do it gradually?
Yeah, well, each person is in their own journey, their own world. Each one of us is perceiving a different reality based on our karma and our mental oscurations and our mental afflictions. We might perceive a similar world, but each one of us is actually getting a slightly different set of appearances, right? And we can think that there's a reality outside of us, but there's nothing actually outside of us. And each one of our perceptions is not the true real one. So this is very important to understand first, that we perceive others, and what we see in them is based on our cognitive filters and our personal story, our expectations and all of that, right? So in the same way that this person might be perceiving you with attachment, you also might be perceiving this person in a certain way that not everybody else perceives this person, right? So in that way, trying to see this person with the purest perception you can have, that's one step, to see that this person also has Buddha nature. Their mind might be temporarily clouded or confused, but is in no way inferior or superior as ourselves, right? And then, but each one of us is having their own journey, and there's just so much we can do. Like, we cannot change a person or try to eradicate this. I mean, the more advanced we are in the path, the more tools we will have to help others, right? But if our minds are confused, we still have attachment and aversion ourselves, it's very difficult to be able to take the causes of suffering from another person, even if we want to stop suffering. But we can do a lot of aspirations for them, we can do practices for them, and we will see some practices. For example, the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving, it has a powerful effect on people. Even you don't have to tell them you're doing this practice for them. You're taking their suffering and you're sending them loving kindness, happiness, clarity of mind. And some amazing things happen because the person is receiving these intentions from you too. there's an interdependence. We're all interdependent. So if we change the way we act, the other people also change. But it's because they're perceiving a different attitude from us too. Now, we can't just decide that a person not be aggressive towards us or attached to us or acting in ways that we wouldn't like them to act in that way, right? We can't just tell them how to be. And most of the time is actually, it backfires when you try to explain the teachings to someone that maybe don't want to hear anything about your practice or your meditation or the teachings you've learned, or you give them a book and they feel it like you want to change them, or they react in a defensive way, right? So you have to just practice and send them a lot of loving kindness and compassion and understanding, and make it your practice to be patient with them too, understanding, and see if you can do anything to not kind of activate that attachment on them, like trigger that attachment on them, or to being compassionate, not rejecting them, also not manipulating them, like trying the best you can to practice yourself, because then the other person will see that you're practicing and they might be more open to ask you or to receive help. Now, it's very difficult to help a person that is attached to you in a way that, like everything you try to explain or give, then it might be misinterpreted as something like a positive quality, but they will exaggerate it and get more attached to you, right? If they perceive you as being very kind to them, they might think they should get more attached. So there's a lot of play there. So sometimes putting a limit or taking distance might be beneficial. You have to evaluate the situation and see what is the best way to help them work with that attachment, right? But also work with yourself. What is that attachment? Maybe that attachment is producing aversion on you, and the more aversion you experience, the more attachment they feel. So you have to work with whatever is coming up in you too, right? Yeah. Anybody else has any comments or questions? Yeah.
This may be kind of related and maybe more about yesterday, kind of aversion, but I understand the teaching with attachment and aversion in most situations, but I have some like violent situations in my past, and I also was thinking I have friends who have like very violent situations at very young ages, and it's hard for me to imagine that, like reimagine it with perception. Like yesterday we sort of brought up a difficult situation, and we're supposed to see it from the outside and think how we were responsible for it in some way. But are there things that happen where you're not responsible? You know? Like otherwise it feels kind of like victim blaming a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Each circumstance is different, and of course in a situation like that, there might be a kind of a subconscious decision of interpreting the situation in a way that creates a trauma. Those situations usually create trauma, right? And we keep telling ourselves the story in certain way that keeps lingering a pain to that experience, or we still have stored some connection to that event. And we cannot just rationalize it and say, well, I'm gonna let go, and I'm not gonna think about it anymore. It's there, it's in our past, it might be a traumatic event, it might be a very strong suffering we had, and that we really didn't have a way to, like, we didn't decide it to get into that situation, or it's actually not our fault or our responsibility in a way, right? So when we do this meditation of observing the event, something interesting starts happening. If you play this situation in your mind, maybe you don't even remember it very well, or you have transformed the memory over the years, but it doesn't matter. However you remember it, you try to recreate the scene, try to remember as much as you can, like what color were the walls, what was hanging on the wall, what was I dressing, like try to recreate the scene in your memory, and then start playing it in chronological order, not just jump from one event to another, but try to kind of see how you got into that situation and how it happened. And as you're playing this situation, you can pause it like a movie in certain moments where you feel there's a strong energy still connected to that event, or was triggered emotion, like those key moments, right? So you pause it and stay some time breathing, taking the energy you left in that event that is still traumatic. And when you do the out breath, you imagine that you liberate the energy, the pain that you took from that event. And of course, there's different degrees. Maybe at the beginning we cannot even think that we are forgiving the people involved, but maybe we are forgiving ourselves, we're being very kind and compassionate to ourselves, taking that energy and healing, right? So we see, without judging or over-reflecting about what happened or what was involved, we just play the event. And we do this. And then we kind of let go, we dedicate the merit, thinking that may we be free from this, may we be able to forgive ourselves, forgive the other people involved, be free from this situation, may we gain understanding and be able to deal with this, right? And then you do it again. Not the same day, maybe another day, or you can do it every day for some time, for some period of time. But the thing is, every time you do this meditation, something is going to change. You're going to start noticing little changes, right? But doing it again and again, this retrocognition exercise can heal. And eventually, one is able to recreate the whole story without feeling any connection to the event, without feeling any pain, without feeling suffering, without feeling blame or blaming or guilt. And we can reach a point where we are completely liberated from it. We can, remember it, observing it, and even feel compassion for the people that were inflicting us some harm, right? And to give you an example, when we go see a movie that is very distressing, maybe a horror film or a suspense film, the first time we see it, it can be shocking, right? We are on our seat, we're like experiencing a lot of emotions connected to the story. But the second time we watch that movie, maybe it's not so surprising. We kind of know what is going to happen, right? And the third time we rewatch the movie, even though it's the same movie, we're experiencing it in a different way. Then maybe the fourth time we are kind of bored. We don't get any emotions anymore. And if we were to watch it and rewatch it, every time will be different. And then if we compare the last time we watched it with the first time, our experience of watching the movie is very different. So every time we do this meditation, there is a change. And by watching it and replaying it and pausing it, we're going to see things we didn't see before and understand what was going on with the other people involved. And also understand their confusion, and of course not justifying their behavior, but we can start healing and feeling compassion and the point is that we liberate ourselves from these events, right? And so it might be difficult to do it with an experience that is still very, like, detonates a lot of strong emotions. And so if that's the case, then maybe it's better to start working with practices that are softer, just cultivating self-compassion, self-loving kindness. We will do some practices with that, doing Tonglen for ourselves, and even maybe in some cases also go for therapy and talk with the therapist about the experience, and they can help us also process the trauma, and then we can do this meditation in a way that can be more beneficial, right? But I know of cases of people who lived very strong experiences, and by doing this again and again and again, a great transformation took place, and they found liberation from the afflictions that were arising connected to the experience. So it can be very beneficial. In the way we did it yesterday, is more for situations where we actually are participating with also engaging our intention, and we could have reacted or do things in a different way, but we just acted impulsively, right? And so when we do that kind of analysis, we want to check, what could I've done differently? Maybe if I didn't react explosively and blaming the other person, maybe if I kept silence and said, give me a little space, I'm going for a walk, we can discuss this later, the whole situation would have been different, right? So when we get to a point like that, we start training the intention to prepare ourselves for the next time we're triggered in a similar situation, and say, I'm a person that usually reacts impulsively, responding in an aggressive way, for example. Well, next time I'm triggered in a similar way, I'm going to set the intention to remain silent and take space, go for a walk and do a little walking meditation, and then come back with a clearer mind, or anything you want to change, and then replay the story in your mind, kind of doing those changes and seeing how that could change the situation. So yeah, but it's different, you see. It's a kind of a different practice, but try to do it in the way I told you. and you can come back and tell me what was your experience if you wish. Okay? Anything else? Well, yeah.
One small request.
Yeah.
While we are meditating, can you just be a little louder?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sometimes I'm not able to
hear.
follow the instruction.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
a distance, but just a little louder.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you, and have a good evening. Good day.